what is going on. So hi everyone, my name is Adam Woolley. This is Scott Raker, the Director of Insurance for Fractured Atlas, which is a huge, awesome, way bigger than Circus Now nonprofit arts support organization that does a lot of really excellent work. They have tons and tons of resources. Circus Now has a partnership with them. This is kind of an expansion on our partnership in that Circus Now is part of the Open Arts Network, which means that Circus Now members can get a Fractured Atlas membership right now for free, and starting in October, I think, at a 50% discount. And this kind of means that at the end of the day, you can be a member of Circus Now and Fractured Atlas for less than the price of being a Fractured Atlas member. Which is part of the fun of this deal. Fractured Atlas is really just interested in having the most direct and kind of sincere connections they can have with artists and helping artists emerge in the United States. And that's exactly what Circus Now is all about. So I'm going to let Scott introduce himself a little bit more. Tonight we're going to go through a presentation of Scott's that goes through the basics of insurance, general liability and accident insurance and performers insurance, and kind of goes into some detail about things that might be specific to circus artists. We're going to record the webinar, so Scott and I know that we're being recorded on video, but also just know that any questions that you post that answers your name and your question, your answer may be posted publicly on the Circus Now website, along with the recording of the webinar for everyone who's not here. I think that's about all. Scott, I'm going to hand it off to you and mute my microphone. And guys, I hope you enjoy. I think this is all going to be wonderful information. I've seen kind of some of the drafts. And if you have any questions at all, just stick them into that little question and answer bubble down at the bottom, and we will get to them as best we can. Scott, I'll throw the reins to you.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. So the main goal tonight is to introduce everybody to Fractured Atlas, tell you a little bit about what we do, and specifically tell you about our insurance program, as well as our relationship with Circus Now, and most importantly, address specific issues that may be related to insurance for circus artists. So let me just share my screen here, and we'll begin looking into insurance for circus artists. So a little bit about Fractured Atlas. We are a nonprofit tech company that helps artists with the business aspect of their work. So we help with a number of different components, including fundraising through our fiscally sponsored projects, managing risk through our insurance program, finding space through our Space Finder application, as well as selling tickets, knowing your audience better, and promoting your work through our Artfully application. Currently, we have over 32,000 members. Our fiscal sponsorship program has 3,500 projects that we support, and they've raised over $68 million through the length of the time that their projects have been open. For our insurance program, we've sold over 10,000 policies. And in total, we estimate that our reach is close to 250,000 artists throughout the country. We have members in every single congressional district in the United States. So specifically for managing your risks as an artist, we have our insurance program. Now, our insurance program exists primarily because we know that it takes risks to put yourself out there as an artist and to make interesting, dynamic, and creative work. With that, we know that those risks present certain hazards that having your work out in the world, it leaves you exposed to. That can leave you exposed to hazards including damage to your equipment, injury to your workers or employees, and injury or damage to other people's equipment or work. Also with this is that insurance companies that would help you manage the risks don't necessarily understand individual artists on their own. So they may not know or may not understand what your particular risks are as one artist. And you may be presented with policies that have higher premiums, or insurance companies may not even consider your work at all as being worth underwriting. And that's where we come in. And that's where we help you find a policy to cover your work. So our main goal and mission is, with the member base that we have, to have a higher buying power, to combine all of our members into one group so that insurance companies can look at us and see us as a resource and understand our loss history across our membership of artists, and understand the specific risk involved more as artists as a whole, and see not necessarily the inflated risks that they may see as components of an artist's work. So we will help you find a policy with that tailored specifically to your needs as an artist. We have many different disciplines, cover really anyone from craft artists to fire performers and everything in between. And we try and pursue policies for everyone within those parameters. While we try and help insurance companies understand artists, we also try to help artists understand insurance and make sure that they're buying the correct policies at the best price with the best coverage. So we do set up pocket guides and have information and try to be as available as possible to provide support for our members, so that when they're pursuing a policy, they know that they're covering their specific risks. With that, we have practicing artists on the insurance staff. So I am a licensed broker through New York State, but I also have worked as an actor, director, a teaching artist, and we have singers on staff, we have performance artists on staff, visual artists. Really everyone who works at Fractured Atlas understands the needs of artists on a personal level. With that, we also pursue discipline-specific applications for our artists. So you can apply online as a performing artist or as a visual artist, teaching artist, etc. We try and shape our applications for insurance companies to so that it's targeted for specific areas of interest within your field. And so with those applications, we have a number of other simple online tools, including access to your entire policy and requests for certificates that you can upload quickly, as well as the possibility of answering questions for if you do need to file a claim, you can start the process through your member account with Fractured Atlas. Also, for all our policies, we cover really all business structures. So anyone from an individual artist to someone working as a DBA or doing business as artists, or with an LLC or a not-for-profit fiscal sponsorship, and even for-profit corporations as well. So now specifically for circus artists, I want to get into what you will generally need and really need to know about the policies that you're pursuing. So the insurance that you'll need is personal coverage for your own property and your own equipment, but also coverage for your employers or your employees or your volunteers, and your equipment as a business, as well as the coverage for your business itself under general liability insurance. So I'll break down all of these different types of insurance so you can understand them a bit better. So for renters and homeowners insurance, this is for your specific private location, your contents, the things you personally own, and the liability related to where you live. So if someone falls on your stairs, it would cover for expenses for that. It would also package the policies to cover both the contents in your home as well as the liability included. However, this will not extend to your business operations. So insurance companies will make a clean break between what they call personal lines and business lines, commercial lines. So you will need separate policies to cover your business-related expenses and operations. So to cover your business specifically is general liability insurance. Now, what general liability insurance is it will cover third-party claims of damage to a location due to your operations or injury to bystanders or audience members. So in other words, this is covering other people and damage to other people's stuff due to your business operations. Some quick examples here is that your set may fall over, knocks a hole in the wall, and the venue will require you to pay for the damages. Or one of your performers' shoes flies off during a show and it hits an audience member in the head and they sue for medical expenses. So this is the policy that you have to cover really your general business operations from contact with the outside world. Now, generally, you'll need general liability insurance when venues require it. So most people will come to us and say, we have this contract with our location, and they are requiring to be listed as additional insured and to show a certificate that states that. So to meet the requirements of a contract with a venue, you would pursue a general liability policy. Usually these would be for a limit of $1 million per occurrence and $2 million in the aggregate. So that's in the whole span of the policy period. They can also be broken down into short-term event policies that would cover only a weekend, or if you have a number of performances over the span of a month or a few months, you could cover it with a short-term policy. Otherwise, you can have an annual policy and pursue that so that your entire operations for the year are covered. So the main reason for this is for peace of mind so that you can know that you're working without constraints. A lot of people see insurance as another constraint to their work. Really, it's to allow you to work and know that you are covered for your operations and that any sort of financial mishap would be covered by anything that could happen. So what to look for in general liability policies is unlimited or blanket additional insureds. This would allow you to extend the policy to as many locations as you need, or managing companies, anyone leasing a location that you may use. Also, you want to double check the limitations to the location or the operation of your business. So that could include what I mentioned before, the time frame, whether you want a short-term or annual policy, but it can also be fixed location specific or to specific operations. So they may ask that you, a policy may be written without aerial work in mind. They would want to know height restrictions, whether it would cover only spectators and not participants, etc. Another component of general liability policies to keep in mind is to make sure that the policy is all risk versus a named peril. So the way that this breaks down is named perils will start by what you're covered from. So it will start by a list of you're covered from fire or vandalism or a windstorm, whereas all risk does the opposite. It says you're covered for all possible perils, and then we'll add exceptions within that. Usually exceptions are that you'll see are related to you'll always see exceptions for nuclear-related risks or war. Those are the two major ones, as well as civil disobedience. Those are on there a lot. But really, if you can get a policy that starts at the base of covering all of your risks, all of your perils, and then we'll make exceptions from there, that's going to give you more coverage for a wider range of your operations. Now, this is also specific to circus artists who are teaching artists as well, since that I've heard that that's a major component to your work through Adam, especially for Circus Now members. One thing to look for is specific binding contingencies that ask for background checks. This can also be a requirement of schools or other locations to make sure that they have at least a knowledge of your policy towards background checks. Also, one thing that will often come up is the height of instruction. If you have anything that is above the ground, they'll want to know the height, and that can certainly affect the premium of the policy or the availability of a policy. Generally, I believe that around 3 feet is, it will be easier to find a policy within 3 feet height limit of instruction. But there are policies available. It will just, the premium will probably be higher as well. Another thing to keep in mind is the specific additional insureds requirements. So as I mentioned before, there may be background checks that are required from a school or a venue if you're a teaching artist, but they will also want to know the specifics of your operations as an educational institution too. Also, one thing to keep in mind is if you're running a workshop is whether the policy will extend to participants or whether it's spectator only. This is important for teaching artists because really general liability is for third-party claims. So it's imagining anyone who's not involved in your specific operations. In many cases, we can pursue policies that will cover participants as well, but they will want to know in advance, and that will be something we'll need to know when we pursue a policy. So speaking of the breakdown between participants and third party versus someone working directly for you, I'll talk a little bit about volunteers and employees and how they are covered by insurance. So volunteers and employees, since they're considered under your operations, they would be covered under separate policies. You would need different insurance to cover injury to volunteers or injury to paid employees. So specifically for volunteers, there's volunteer accident insurance. This would cover people who are volunteering for you or people who are receiving a small stipend. Then if you have paid employees, they would be covered by workers' compensation insurance. So again, those would be two separate policies to cover two different groups of people working under your operations. Now, for volunteer accident insurance, a lot of times this will be required by unions, or it will be required if you are working in certain spaces, or also if you just want to make sure that you are covering your volunteers' needs, then you can pursue a policy. We actually have a set policy through our broker that covers up to 25 volunteers or stipended workers for a year at $150 for the premium with a service fee of $50. So it's $200 for an annual policy that covers 25 and under volunteers. And that will also include coverage for people going to your operations and leaving from your operations. So it will cover really anything in between. A thing to keep in mind is a lot of people will ask what technically is a stipended worker. And that does start to bleed into bigger questions of employment law, which we'll talk about in a second with workers' compensation. But really it's to cover anyone who's just receiving a per diem or being compensated at least for their time or transportation or meals while they're working for you. So it's really set up to cover for small per diems and compensation. Now for workers' compensation, this is the policy that's set up state by state. Each state will have different programs, and it will cover all employees on your payroll. So these are actual paid employees receiving a W-2. It can also extend to independent contractors who don't have their own policy. This is, again, another question that runs into issues with employment law, and it's always best to consult an employment lawyer. But independent contractors should, by law, have their own coverage. However, a workers' compensation policy, if it needed to, could extend to cover an independent contractor in an emergency. They just wouldn't be able to be written on the policy itself. So it starts to get a little bit convoluted and complex. And since I'm not an employment lawyer, we always recommend that people actually contact employment lawyers, usually recommending volunteer lawyers for the arts, if they have any questions about what constitutes an independent contractor versus a paid employee. Now, moving on to covering your stuff and your equipment is equipment and property insurance. So this will cover mobile equipment, rented or owned, that you have that's important to your business operations. So that can include basic equipment, your sets, props, or extend to costumes as well. Really anything that is pertinent to your operations. So usually people will pursue equipment policies when a rental house or some other body is asking to be listed on a certificate as a loss payee. That's similar to what an additional insured would be for a general liability policy, but it's specific to equipment policies and is set up as the separate insurance policies. This is also, so if someone asks you for proof of inland marine insurance, that is insurance jargon for what we call equipment policies. It's since insurance started historically to cover specifically marine items, when items started to be moved across land through trains, instead of just calling it something else, they called it inland marine policies. They just added a word. So it's jargon, but basically it means your mobile equipment rented or owned. And it's also, it really is something that you will want to consider if you have accumulated enough equipment that it would cause a financial hardship to actually replace the equipment. Now, to keep in mind when you're pursuing a policy to cover your equipment, you want to look at a policy that provides replacement costs versus the actual cash value. So actual cash value would be the item's cost, but would include the depreciation of value over time, whereas replacement cost would be coverage to actually replace the item. So clearly it's best to have replacement cost because that will cover your present costs to get up and running again and get that equipment back and not have to factor in depreciation of the item over time. Also, scheduled versus unscheduled policies. Scheduled policies would be scheduled to a specific list of your items. So if you had specific props, they would ask for, what you see in the picture here, they would ask for the coverage for the unicycle, the items behind there, and they would all be on the list, 1, 2, 3. Whereas unscheduled would be more for a certain amount of coverage. So it'd be for $15,000 of coverage for damaged equipment. We always pursue policies that are unscheduled so that it gives you as broad coverage as possible, as well as we pursue policies that have replacement cost rather than actual cash value. Negative and data loss, this is specific more if you have film components to your operations. So negative and data loss will cover the actual negatives of film, and it has expanded to digital data loss as well. So if that is a component and due to damage to your equipment, you actually lose the any footage that you're using, then this is the type of insurance that would extend to cover either the retrieval or the replacement of your data loss. Separate from replacement costs is rental reimbursement cost, which would cover the rental of an item if it was damaged so that your operations could continue. So if you broke certain equipment, but you had a show the next day and you really needed to use that equipment, and the only way to cover it would be if you rented it from a rental house, you could get the costs of that rental reimbursed through this additional coverage. One thing to keep in mind is, especially when you're thinking of pursuing a policy, is the specific deductible, the amount that you're responsible for before the insurance kicks in. So in a lot of cases, it will be a $500 or $1,000 deductible, or based on specific perils or risks. So you may see damage to the equipment would be at $500, whereas vandalism or theft would be set at $1,000. So it's always something to keep in mind when you're looking at a quote before actually purchasing the policy, what the deductible is, and factoring in the deductible cost as well as the premium cost, and how much that how much the sum of that is versus the sum of the actual coverage. So if you have a $1,000 deductible and a $1,000 premium cost, and you're looking to cover $2,500 worth of equipment, then it may not be really cost effective to have a policy, since it will be already over $2,000 that you would have to cover of that $2,500. So another type of insurance to keep in mind for your business, if you are running as a not-for-profit or a fiscally sponsored project, is directors and officers insurance. Directors and officers insurance would provide coverage against claims if you have a board of directors or executives, and it will protect their personal assets and keep it separate from your business assets, so that someone, if they are suing your company as well as everyone on your board, directors and officers would extend to cover their personal assets. This is something to keep in mind when you're beginning to think of becoming a 501c3, and it helps. A lot of times board members will require proof of it before they actually proceed with signing up as a board member. So something to keep in mind is it can only be obtained by 501c3s, not-for-profit organizations, or fiscally sponsored organizations. So if you're an individual or an LLC, you wouldn't be able to obtain directors and officers insurance. It's something that you really want to pursue when your board is involved in managing your finances or raising funds, to make sure that they are covered separately, and that the coverage for your business will extend to them as well. So here's a look at our action center for our insurance page and program. You'll see here you can request a certificate and file a claim, as well as pull up your active policies and pull up PDF copies of your policies. You can also, of course, always ask a question, and one of our staff will either get back to it by email or through the phone. So I want to talk, as Adam mentioned, he mentioned that Circus Now is a member of our Open Arts Network. To apply for insurance and to receive a quote, you can be a Fractured Atlas member at the free level. However, if you do want to bind or purchase a policy, you do have to sign up at the paying level of membership, at our professional level of membership, which has a $10 monthly membership due payment. However, with Circus Now, if you are a member through Circus Now, you can instantly use their link and sign up for a free year of membership with Fractured Atlas, and then half off your membership due payments after that point. So if you are interested in membership with Circus Now, or you're a Circus Now member, you can contact them directly for that membership link and information. So we really do try to emphasize a level of urgency and speed in both setting up your application and answering any of your questions. So it takes only a few minutes to actually sign up for membership, and should only take about 15 minutes to fill out your application for the insurance policy that you're pursuing. From there, it takes 3 to 5 business days for us and our broker to pursue a policy for you, and then we will send you a quote, at which point you can decide whether to proceed with purchasing the policy or not. Of course, if you have any questions in the meantime, we try to answer all of those questions within 1 business day. So with that, there's the information for Fractured Atlas, our website, www.fracturedatlas.org. And if you do have direct questions for us, you can contact us at support@fracturedatlas.org, or you can contact us through Twitter @FracturedAtlas. And that's it. Thank you, everybody, and hopefully we can answer any questions that have come up.
Yay. Thank you so much, Scott.
Sure.
That's a lot of fun and really useful. So I had one question come up during the webinar, which was from Andrew Monroe. And sorry, there's a rehearsal going on in the other room, the space I'm in. And he's asking, he's an aerial rigger, so essentially a technician and a guy who's in charge of putting a lot of people up in the air safely, and that is his expertise, and his whole, probably a huge part of his business is putting people up in the air. He's interested in what we have to offer the artist, but would also be interested to know if this is something that would be worthwhile for people like him. If I presume if he is a sole proprietor or as an LLC or whatever his business structure is, if you're a rigger, what kind of policy could you get through Fractured Atlas, or what kind of policy should you be looking at getting regardless, to cover yourself in the event that, I presume, in the event that something you rig goes wrong,
right,
no fault of your own. That's I'm presuming a little bit upon your question there, Andrew. And if you'd like to clarify for me, you can stick it in the Q&A.
Sure. So primarily, I imagine that for the risks of if they are actually rigged up and it's separate outside of their own operations, then a rigger would want to have general liability insurance to cover really anyone outside of their operations. If it's within your operations, who is being, basically it's breaking down whoever is rigged would, if they can be considered insured under your policies or under your operations, that may be something better to be covered by workers' compensation or volunteer accident insurance. But I imagine primarily it would be third-party claims, separate third-party claims. So that would be general liability insurance to cover damage to a location or injury to bystanders. With that, we actually do have um, technicians insurance, which would probably be the best application to submit. So it will take into account any number of different technicians that are related to artistic fields. So that would be for general liability insurance.
Great. I also have a question here from Dexter Tripp asking if you can get directors and officers insurance if you're an LLC that is fiscally sponsored for a specific project. So if you're a for-profit company that is fiscally sponsored for a specific project that you have, can you get directors and officers insurance for that specific project?
That's really interesting. That would be something to look into. I imagine that if you do have a fiscally sponsored project for that specific, that project, and you have executives or a board, I imagine that would be something that you could pursue. It would be something that I would want to look at the specifics of, and would probably depend on a bit more of the details, but it would be something that we could definitely pursue and look into. I imagine that it would extend to the operations of the fiscally sponsored project, though.
And just to bounce off of that for a second and further answering the question, it sounds like directors and officers insurance is specifically for protecting kind of a board of directors or an executive director. If you're an LLC who doesn't have a separate board for the project that you're talking about, I don't think it would do very much to protect you as an LLC. Is that you can't like get blanket protection for your LLC from directors and officers. Is that right, Scott?
No, yeah, that would probably be general liability that you would want to look into, or professional liability if you were interested in covering more professional related personal injury claims, defamation of character for anything that you do. However, for fiscally sponsored projects, a lot of times directors and officers insurance can be linked to employee practices liability insurance, which would extend to cover things such as wrongful termination or sexual harassment, things of those natures that have to do with the operations of your business itself. Does that help answer that question to some degree?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll have a blanket, like, if your question didn't get answered to the
sure,
do this at the end of the webinar.
Yeah, definitely.
So I have another question from Maggie, whose last name I'm not going to go for right now. Sorry, Maggie. I'm saving myself from embarrassment. Who owns a very small kinetic arts troupe, who struggles with finding coverage that includes both instruction, primarily for prop manipulation, so juggling or Diablo or things like that, not aerials, so stuff that's, on the ground. So struggling to find coverage that includes instruction and performance, which is fire, dance, and kinetic arts, no aerials. Is this the sort of thing that exists through Fractured Atlas? Do you think Fractured Atlas might be able to help in that context?
It's certainly something that we can pursue. We have found policies that for operations similar to that. It can depend. We do have a separate fire performers application. So for anyone involved in fire performance, or if that's a component of your operations, that's probably the best place to start for filling out your application. And we do have, so the insurance company that we use or usually see policies come through is Frazier Insurance Company, specifically for fire performers. So it would extend, we can certainly pursue a policy. It's always, I wish I could promise insurance for everyone, and I certainly, it's our goal to provide policies for as many artists as possible. And we certainly have a real urge and pride in finding policies to cover work that includes fire performance or components that have a greater assumed risk. However, since insurance is run at the state-to-state level and really depends on your specific operations, it would depend on your specific application. But of course, if you're interested, you can always submit an application and we'll be happy to pursue a policy. Or if we're unable to get it, we always try and find a referral for at least some other possible option.
Great. So I'm just muting my audio every time
Sure.
Scott's talking so everyone can hear him. The next question is from Diana Lozano, who asks, do you offer short-term policies for theatrical productions? She's interested in covering the performers during the rehearsal process and the show in case of accidents. But the cast would be getting paid as independent contractors. And just to expand on Diana's question just a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, the way most circus arts companies work right now in the United States is as hiring their performers as independent contractors.
Mm-hmm.
There are some of the larger companies, Cirque Mechanics or some of the kind of big touring American companies will definitely hire as employees, but most of the work that's being done, certainly by emerging artists and certainly more on the local and regional levels, is companies hiring people
Mm-hmm.
as independent contractors. And so I think her question is very apropos to a larger question of the communities right now, which is, how do I, as the entity who's hiring all these independent contractors, make sure that my performers who are independent contractors are covered in case of accidents?
Mm-hmm.
Diana, I do want to be sure your individual question gets answered, but I saw an opportunity to expand to what I see as kind of a recurring question in the circus arts community.
Yeah, and that's absolutely, it's a question across most performing artists fields. It certainly comes up with choreographers and dance and any sort of theatrical productions. It's unfortunately it's a more limited market that is available to cover performers, as well as specifically for the way that a lot of performance companies are set up to cover independent contractors. So really how it breaks down is that the regulations usually have it that independent contractors are responsible for their insurance policy and coverage, and that they can't be initially included on the policy itself. The policy, again, can extend to independent contractors, but they just would not be written into the policy. And workers' compensation is based on audits at the end of the policy period. So it would be adjusted to anything that happened throughout the policy period's effective dates. I know that's not it's certainly not the most satisfying answer for me, and something that we always work for we're really pushing for more options for workers' compensation because we understand that that's a huge need for artists, circus artists, really artists in general. One possible option is some payroll companies are able to write on their customers. They can extend their workers' compensation to cover their anyone working under their customers' operations. Another possible option is to go through your state insurance fund, and they would have specific information about how to cover independent contractors. But it is an ongoing issue, and certainly one that is something that we always look for more options, and are continuing to pursue higher coverage.
The other thing I want to riff on this question just real quick, in partial non-answer to your question, Diana, is something Scott mentioned earlier, which is there are times when, as far as the state or insurance companies are concerned, you don't have a choice about whether or not someone working for you is an independent contractor or should be a real employee. This is something that you'd have to consult an employment lawyer about.
Yeah.
or look at the irs.gov website. There are a lot of times when, especially in the arts, people are being paid as independent contractors when in reality the kind of rules and laws that are in place around what it means to be an independent contractor would actually want you to hire them as employees. I'm not saying that that's the case here. I'm not saying that that's the thing. I'm just saying that it would be worth looking into some of those rules, because it may be that you can hire people onto W-2s and pay them and protect them through workman's comp. It sounds like it's a real gray area, Scott. I just want to clarify that this is a really gray area where your insurance doesn't cover independent contractors, but it can.
Yeah, and that's insurance in general and workers' compensation in general, unfortunately, how it's written. But yeah, I think that's definitely to the broader point of getting, usually consulting an employment lawyer is a good idea if you have questions or if you are finding yourself within that gray area, because they would let you know whether they are actually the operations that they're performing for you, whether it could be covered or considered a paid employee versus an independent contractor. There are sort of broad stroke generalizations of if someone is responsible for, so if they're contracted basically for a set time and have control over the own ways and means that whatever they're providing for you is completed. So someone say asks for just, here's $1,000, go make me a set. They could be considered an independent contractor. Whereas if they had a scheduled itinerary that you set up, you need to accomplish this on a certain day, and here's your budget, and it's broken down in this way, they may be considered a paid employee. But again, those are broad strokes, and for specifics, you would really need to consult an employment lawyer for your specific business.
Yeah. And if you don't feel like you can afford an employment lawyer or don't have access to volunteer lawyers for the arts, irs.gov is actually super accessible for stuff like this. It's a little bit techno jargon, but it's worth looking in there. The next question is from Dexter, and he's asking, is there coverage that covers aerial acts, fire, and dog acts? Scott, I have a guess what your answer to that is going to be, but I'm going to let you answer anyway.
Well, so for aerialists, we can certainly pursue general liability policies. We have a number of policies in place. A lot of times, the policies that will be available to us will be spectator only. So they would only cover audience members. And there would be specific contingencies about the height of performance, as well as whether any performance would actually be over audience members. We do have a specific fire performers policy or application that is available, and can pursue policies for that. For dogs, I don't know if we have a specific, if I've seen a specific policy actually that for animals. I know that sometimes there are contingencies that will restrict the inclusion of animals in an act or in operations. But if you are interested in put it on the your application and provide the information, we could certainly see if there is something that is available or that we could pursue. That would probably be under a general liability policy.
And just both to jog my own memory and in quick answer to the question, general liability isn't protecting me. It's protecting me in case an audience member gets hurt. It's for third party things.
Exactly.
If you have a dog act and the dog runs off stage and pees on someone's Gucci shoes and they sue you for damages, your general liability will pay for their Gucci shoes that your dog peed on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Personal story that.
Yeah. If the dog chews your own set, then that would be something you could cover under equipment insurance. Or if they hurt someone who's working under you, that could be volunteer accident or workers' compensation.
Great. What looks like right now our last question is from Maggie. She's asking, what is the benefit of an LLC to have general liability coverage if all the performers and teachers are required to carry their own insurance as independent contractors anyway. So if you have your entity, which is an LLC, which only really ever hires independent contractors who are therefore required to carry their own insurance, why should your LLC carry general liability?
So that will be the breakdown between general liability, which will cover third-party claims, and again, workers' compensation, which would, if you're an independent contractor, you may be responsible for having your own coverage. So workers' compensation would cover an employee or someone working under you, and for an independent contractor, that would be themselves. Whereas general liability insurance would extend for third-party claims against that person. So it would cover if someone if a teaching artist was going under a broader LLC's operations, and something happened and they were sued for whatever reason, they would be considered insured under the auspices of the broader company, of the broader teaching artist organization. So it would be covering the third-party claims related to the business and protecting any injuries to bystanders or possibly participants versus workers' compensation, which would be the employee themselves.
The other clarification I'd just ask for there, even just for myself, is my understanding is, suppose I'm an LLC who's hiring independent contractors, and God forbid an audience member gets hurt because they trip over the tight wire that's part of my set. They can both sue me, the LLC, the person whose tight wire it actually was, the independent contractor whose it actually was, and the venue. And if everyone has general liability except for me, the LLC, then I'm going to be fronting my own costs for a lot of things in that case. Right.
Yeah. It's in America, you know, as anyone can sue any amount of people. And a lot of cases, people will, if something happens, they'll sue every possible entity that would be related to it. It would then be either up to the court as well as insurance companies to decide and arbitrate over what the proximate cause, what they call the proximate cause, and the primary reason for the issue was, and who would be at fault for that. So it would really, it's really, but you know, insurance would also cover defense costs for even if you're wrongfully sued, but you still have legal costs and legal fees. You can pursue policies to make sure that you're covered, so that if you have any sort of public outlet, liability insurance will extend to cover those third-party claims.
Another question has popped up from Diana. This is a clever question, Diana. If some of your performers work as volunteers throughout the year, say for charity gigs, and then sometimes get paid gigs sporadically, does volunteer accidents insurance cover them? Even though they're sometimes paid as independent contractors, they're also performing sometimes as volunteers. Is it case by case, or can your volunteer accident insurance cover them because they volunteered for you throughout the year?
It would be case by case in that. So it would be if they're operating as a volunteer, that's when volunteer accident insurance would extend to them. But if they are operating as independent contractors or paid employees, then that would be, they would have to be covered by workers' compensation.
I do have a question here, though, that I think is something like Diana's doing. Many, many times during rehearsals, and this is true of theater and dance companies as well, actors or dancers or circus artists won't be paid for rehearsals. And so they are essentially volunteering for rehearsals. And then the shows, they can be more legitimately booked as independent contractors. So this is a tricky, tricky area that I don't even want to put my toes into too far.
Yeah.
But there is the idea that if I'm requiring an employee to appear from the hours of 8 to 3, then they're not an independent contractor anymore. They're a W-2 employee.
Yeah.
And I'd have to find the link. I'll find the link and post it when I post the webinar. But if you require certain hours, then you have to pay someone as an employee. But if you're not paying them any money for those hours, then they're a volunteer essentially. Would that be covered under volunteer accident insurance? And this is true of theater and dance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that would how that would be considered. Of course, that would be something that would have to be arbitrated by any sort of claims adjuster. But I imagine that they would see that as part of the operations that they were being compensated for. So if they were receiving an amount that could be considered a salary or anything like that, then they would be considered either an independent contractor or a paid employee.
Yeah, it seems a little too good to be true to imagine that we could maybe cover under volunteer accident insurance, but it does seem a little too good to be true. So probably not true.
Yeah, it would be more like if someone was, volunteering and running house for you during certain performances, but they were also in a production later that they were being compensated for. Those would be what would be split up between a volunteer and a employee.
Great. That is all the time that we have. So great. We fit it right into an hour.
Excellent. Yeah.
Perfect. Well done. Thank you everyone who attended live, and thank you everyone who is now watching afterwards. Scott, do you want to say the email address that people should contact if they have more questions for Fractured Atlas about insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. support@fracturedatlas.org. That will be able to go directly and filtered to the insurance program. So we'll be able to get those questions. Anything that came up tonight that you had more questions or had more individualized specific questions to your operations, please feel free to send those in.
And again, if you are enjoying the work that Circus Now is doing for circus artists in the United States and you have not supported us or are not a member, please become a member today. Right now, that is the primary way that Circus Now keeps doing what we're doing. We have a very, very, very small staff who's paid very, very, very little. And we're trying to do a whole lot to really help, kind of educate other arts support organizations like Fractured Atlas, and also just kind of grant makers and policy makers and venues all over the country about the explosion of circus arts that's going on. And if you think that's an important mission and you haven't become a member yet, please help us out by becoming a member. You can go to circusnow.org and click on join. The specific URL is circusnow.org/become a CN member, but I'll put a link when I post the video. Thank you everyone for coming. Through Circus Now, you can also get access to Fractured Atlas. You can become their professional level member. Your first year is totally free. And your second year is 50% off. So you get access both to their fiscal sponsorship program and to their insurance programs and all of that great stuff. Just because one day a year ago, I called Fractured Atlas and said, can I put my organization in the Open Arts Network? So it's a really wonderful program, and they're a really killer organization. They have always been super great on response times. I've had nothing but lovely experiences with them and their customer service. So as much as I can support them and they can support us, I'm super excited that all you guys came out. Scott, thank you for all the great information and all the great everything. And you guys will be seeing more and more from you. There will be a survey sent to everyone who registered for the webinar coming up soon, just to kind of get a sort of state of the market for performers insurance for circus artists in the US. There's some just survey questions that Scott and I worked on together that will give us some data that will make his life as he approaches the underwriters, who are the people actually write the insurance policies. If we can gather some basic data about circus arts and what artists are paying now and what they're covered for and what their limits are, then we'll be able to go to underwriters a lot more intelligently for kind of maybe finding some better policies out there to cover emerging circus artists. So thank you everyone again. Please support Circus Now. Thank you to Scott, Fractured Atlas. I'm going to sign off for the night. And we hope we answered all your questions. And if not, feel free to shoot me an email or shoot Scott an email at support@fracturedatlas.org.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Thank you everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.